on the phone Nicole Belle, senior editor of Crooks and Liars.com. Welcome to the program, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Sam.
So, Nicole, I think I first got wind of this when I saw your petition that you began to circulate. It has since really gotten a tremendous amount of support. But tell us what is the petition about?
Well, last Thursday, Chuck Todd was on Morning Joe on MSNBC talking about Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, as us liberals like to call it, and was on with Ed Rendell, and they were talking about how, you know, the Obamacare is essentially very unpopular, and Ed Rendell pointed out that the reason why it's so unpopular is because there's so much misinformation out there. And Chuck Todd said, well, yeah, the Republicans are selling their message really well. And then he kind of went on and said, but, you know, I hear this a lot, and I don't think it's my job to sell Obamacare. That's the president's job. And I heard that, and it just, you know, makes me grind my teeth, because at Crooks and Liars, for the last 9 years, we've been listening to journalists basically abdicate their job of fact-checking, just the most basic fact-checking, and allowing every single issue to become this, excuse me, he said, she said of, well, Democrats say this and Republicans say that, and we'll leave it at that, without ever giving people information, without ever giving people the facts so that they have nothing to base it on, nothing to know. And if you look at the polls on Obamacare, 80% of Americans don't know what it does or how it impacts them. I mean, that's a huge abdication of the responsibility to fact check. When, you know, Chuck Todd comes on TV and says, yeah, the Republicans' messaging is really, is really strong, that's not telling people that what the Republicans are doing is lying about Obamacare and scaring the American people.
Well, what's also really stunning about that is that, you know, if we weren't talking about a law that was already begun to have been implemented, that we are at this point not talking about a political campaign, we're not even talking about lobbying to pass a law, we're talking about something that exists. I mean, you could do the same thing. You could say the same thing about Medicare. I mean, if Chuck Todd, if the Republicans were out there saying that Medicare is not controlled by the government is coming to take away your Medicare, the idea that Chuck Todd would not feel obligated to say, actually, that's not true, Medicare is a government program, is fantastical. I mean, the reality here is that this has already been litigated. This is what we never hear are also the stories of what if we were to repeal Obamacare at this point. It would be disastrous for the entire medical industry at this point, because this is something that has been in the works for a couple of years. It is moving forward. That's what's even more weird about it to me, is that this isn't even a question about an agenda to get to a political place. There's a reality here, and that is that Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it, exists.
Right, and if you talk to American people and you ask them about the parts of Obamacare that've already been implemented, such as, you know, allowing your children to stay on your policy until they're 26, about not being dropped for pre-existing conditions, about not being dropped once you hit your cap, these are things that are exceptionally popular with the American people. They love that. So you go boom, 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 boom. Do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? And Americans say yes. You say, do you want Obamacare? And immediately Americans say no. And that's because they keep hearing from Republicans that this is a failed program. They keep hearing from Republicans that this is going to destroy the country. Ted Cruz, in between reading green eggs and ham, said the worst or the most threatening thing to the American people right now is Obamacare. And I for the life of me, can't figure out how that is. And it's one thing to say that on the Senate floor, but if he comes on the Sunday shows and he says that, then I feel strongly that, Chuck Todd or David Gregory or George Stephanopoulos, whoever he's talking to, has an obligation to their viewership to call them on that and say, but wait a second. This is the truth, isn't it?
Now, didn't Chuck Todd?
And they never do.
Didn't Chuck Todd reply to sort of the critique of his comments on Twitter? What did he say?
He got a little testy, and he said, "Of course, I didn't say that we shouldn't call out lies, but it's one thing to backtrack on Twitter. It's another thing to actually do it in action, and we don't see that in action, and we don't see any of our journalists. And Chuck Todd is sort of, I hate saying this, he's sort of a useful tool in this because he's not the only person who's doing this, and he's certainly not even the most egregious person doing it, but he's the only one who actually openly admitted that he doesn't feel like it's his job to do it. But we've never heard Chuck Todd come up to, Rand Paul and say, but, if you are successful in repealing Obamacare, what does that do to the parents who have a child who can't get insurance because they can't find a job? What does that do to the parents whose child has, leukemia and has been dropped by their insurance company? These are things that are being protected for the American people by Obamacare. What do you think will happen? And putting it in those real-world terms, these real-world aspects, instead of this kind of ethereal, oh, this is the worst thing that ever happened to the country.
It's interesting because he blames the administration for not selling Obamacare enough. And I think that there is certainly, I think that critique may be the case, but that does not inoculate him from his responsibility of still saying, hey, you know what? The Obama administration hasn't been very good at reminding people that it's daylight at 12 noon. But the reality is it's daylight at 12 noon.
Right.
Right.
The whole notion that he has to sell the program is a big straw man. Nobody's asking journalists to sell programs. What we're asking them to do is present facts so that their viewers are informed. And all you have to do is look at polls to know that most Americans are hugely uninformed about what Obamacare is and does.
So you started a petition, and a couple other organizations got behind it. Tell us how many people have signed this already.
The last time I checked, it was just under 140,000. So that's great. I mean, 140,000. Right. And we went out, I've been working with Credo. We went out with a letter yesterday asking for people to actually call NBC News and tell them, we expect journalists to be journalists, and we expect them to present facts and to call out lies. And, my initial letter said, call out Republican lies. But honestly, I want them to call out all lies. If a Democrat is lying, call that out too. But when you come out to call out the lies of politicians, 9 times out of 10 it's a Republican that it's going to be. But, we went out with a letter yesterday saying call NBC. NBC was getting like 100 calls an hour. Wow. The last time I checked, we've had about 1,500 calls reported to NBC News. So I'm just thrilled that this has resonated and that people agree with me that journalists, the media, has really fallen down on the job. And we've got 2 wars in the Middle East that sort of show that the media hasn't been doing the hard work of being adversarial towards the government, because that's really what their function is. That's right. Why they're called the Fourth Estate. And
the argument that back in the day that the anti-war or the leave the weapons inspectors crowd in has really not done their job in selling this would have been laughable. So have you heard what the reaction is at NBC News? I mean, do you have any sense? Do you have any Have you heard from anybody working inside there? Have you seen any indication that this is impacting them in some way?
Well, it's been really interesting, Sam, because I've had a really good relationship with people at MSNBC because of Crooks and Liars for years. And I do hear from people at MSNBC for various shows, production for various shows, on a regular basis. And I've had absolute radio silence, which is very unusual. So I'm pretty sure they've been told not to talk to me anymore. But it's also interesting because when you watch the shows, a lot of the hosts are sort of circling their wagons around Chuck Todd, and you hear a lot of, well, President Obama hasn't really sold this program. I've been hearing that repeated over and over and over again on all the different shows on MSNBC, and, that may or may not be true, but that's sort of beside the point.
Well, when he sold it is when it passed.
Right.
I mean,
clearly it worked.
That's the thing, is that at this point, it's really, the idea of you never hear, you never hear this construct with anything else, which is just very interesting. And part of it is, it's a relatively rare phenomenon that you see the attempts to repeal a policy before it's been instituted in such a public way. I mean, generally, it's just like we want to roll back financial regulations in Dodd-Frank. It's just an interesting construct, and it's I can only imagine what the dynamics are over there in terms of how much the people can sort of say, yeah, this is actually a problem. We need to do a better job of calling out the sort of fibs. I mean, I will say this, that the one or two places I've seen that do a very good job with this is, places like, Wonkblog, which is, theoretically not as partisan or ideological as MSNBC is, but they're doing a better job of just simply doing the fact checking, because presumably they're just reporting more on the actual realities of the policy versus what is going to generate, I guess, some political heat, I guess. I don't know.
Right. Well, I think there's a very cushy relationship between on-air talent and, politicians in Washington. And, there's a lot of marriages between them. There's, a lot of cocktail parties. There's a lot of dinners. There's a lot of benefits. And, there is something inherently corrupting about that it's hard to be mean to someone that you're going to go and have a barbecue with, the following Saturday. And John McCain in particular figured that out a long time ago, right, and has been courting the press ever since. And, they make a big point of showing John McCain's barbecue, his big weekend barbecue in Arizona, where he invites everybody from the media, and it's a big deal. And that is one of the problems, is that the media has become too embedded in politicians to be able to actually accurately and factually report on them.
I remember reading Alexei Sales back in a book about the old comedy days in Britain, I guess in the late 80s, maybe it was. Alexei Sales said, the problem with success for comedians is you get famous, you end up being friends with Phil Collins, and you can't talk about how much his music sucks. And
exactly.
It's a similar dynamic. Well, Nicole, we've put a link to the petition on our blog at majority.fm. Really appreciate your coming on and talking to us about us. And congratulations. That's a tremendous, frankly, off the top of my head, I'm willing to bet that 140,000 signatures represents a significant portion of the number of people who watch Chuck Todd's show on a daily basis.
I think you're actually correct. Yes.
So congratulations to you on that. I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about it.
Thank you so much for asking me, Sam.
Nicole Belle, folks, crooksandliars.com.